Hi everyone, in today's video presentation we'll be exploring a very important data collection tool, that is qualitative interviews. It's going to be a long video presentation as we have to cover 5 key points: the meaning and purpose of interviews, the 3 different types of interviews, approaches to questioning, interviewing skills, and the most popular form of interviews, that is the semi-structured interviews. Now, what do we mean by an interview? According to Genesis, interviewing is a meeting of 2 persons to exchange information and ideas through questions and responses, resulting in communication and joint construction of meaning about a specific topic. It's quite a straightforward definition. Now, what is the purpose of interviews? Why do we use interviews as a research tool? There could be many reasons, but I have included only 7 of them here. We employ interviews as a data collection tool in order to gather valid and reliable data that are relevant to our research questions and objectives. We use interviews to explore individual views, experiences, beliefs, and motivations. We use interviews to gain a deeper understanding of an observed phenomenon. We use interviews to explore sensitive topics and explore topics on a more micro and personal levels. We use interviews to confirm or expand quantitative findings. We employ interviews to provide a foundation for designing our studies. So these are the different purposes of using interviews as a research tool. When we use interviews as researchers, we rely on this particular tool because material gathered through interviews is one of the most common methods in the field of research. Interviews are often used as a primary method or a way of further focusing on participant observation. They allow material to be accessed from social situations where the researcher wasn't or cannot be present. In interviews, key participants are individuals who appear to have a wide knowledge of the social situation that you as a researcher are interested in. Sometimes these individuals stand at the heart of the culture you are investigating. Moreover, interviews are useful in establishing the most important research questions, the research questions of your study. Through interviews, we may access and learn about other situations, other people, and other organizations. There are 3 major types of interviews: structured interviews, unstructured interviews, and semi-structured interviews. Let's look into the first type first. In structured or direct interviews, sometimes it's called direct interviews, the questions and acceptable responses are specified in advance, and responses are rated for appropriateness of the content. Structured interviews are also called standardized interviews as they are pre-planned to a high degree of accuracy and precision. It uses questionnaires based on a predetermined and standardized or identical set of questions. These are referred to as interviewer-administered questionnaires. While interviewing participants, as a researcher, you read out each question and then record the responses on a schedule, usually with pre-coded answers. Since structured interviews are used to collect quantifiable data, they are sometimes called as quantitative research interviews. The second type of interviews is semi-structured interviews. Semi-structured interviews allow researchers to have a list of themes and questions to be covered in the interview, and this may vary from an interview to another, but usually we have a list of themes and questions at the beginning. These interviews are non-standardized and they are often referred to as qualitative interviews. You may skip some questions in semi-structured interviews, whereas the order of the questions may also vary according to the flow of the conversation. You may also need to have additional questions to explore your research questions. There is an element of flexibility here in semi-structured interviews. The nature of the questions and the discussion mean that the data will be recorded by audio recording or perhaps note-taking. Well, in this presentation, we will further explore semi-structured interviews a bit later because this is the most commonly used data collection tool and we need to know a bit more about it. In an exploratory research study, in-depth interviews can be very helpful to find out what is happening and to seek new insights. Semi-structured or unstructured interviews may be used in relation to an exploratory study. In descriptive study, however, structured interviews can be used as a means to identify general patterns. In an exploratory study, semi-structured interviews can be used in order to understand the relationships between variables, such as those revealed from a descriptive study, whereas structured interview may also be used in relation to an explanatory study in a statistical sense. Here you can see the uses of 3 different types of interviews in each of the main research categories. Structured interviews can be used in descriptive and explanatory studies more frequently. Semi-structured interviews in exploratory and explanatory, and structured interviews are frequently used only in exploratory studies. Right, you can have 3 different types of questions in your interviews: open, probing, specific and closed questions. The use of open questions will allow participants to define and describe the situation or event. An open questionnaire is designed to encourage the interviewee to provide an extensive and developmental answer and may be used to reveal attitudes or obtain facts. It encourages the participant to reply as they wish. An open question is likely to start with or include one of the following words, like what, how, or why. For example, how would you describe yourself? What motivates you? What do you see as your strengths, etc.? Probing questions can be used to explore responses that are of significance to the research topic. They may be worded like open questions but request a particular focus or direction. For instance, what eventually happened? Looking back, what would you do differently now, if anything? These types of questions are simpler to those used in structured interviews. Specific and closed questions. They can be used to obtain specific information or to confirm a fact or an opinion. For instance, have you ever met Joe before? Where did you go to college? So here you're eliciting specific information. There are 5 types of questions that you can use in your interviews: descriptive, structured, contrast, clarification, and follow-up questions. You can pause the video and see the examples of each type of question. As a researcher, you can interview more than one participant at one time, and that is called a focus group interview. A focus group interview is a group interview that focuses clearly upon a particular issue, product, service, or topic, and encompasses the need for an interactive discussion among participants. If you are running a focus group, you will probably be referred to as a moderator or a facilitator, and your job will be And your job will be to keep the group within the boundaries of the topic. Your job will be to generate interest in the topic and encourage discussion, whilst at the same time you don't allow the group members to discuss everything or to share their opinion on topics other than the research themes. So you have to restrict them from discussing everything. Now let's turn to semi-structured interviews, which researchers often use in different types of exploratory studies. Semi-structured interviews allow researchers to develop in-depth accounts of experiences and perceptions with individuals. Now examine the wording of this statement. What do each of the key words suggest? For example, in-depth accounts. In-depth accounts suggest individual stories. And you cannot explore individual stories in a questionnaire. The reason why semi-structured interviews is probably the best tool to use for this purpose. As part of the planning, you need to take certain steps in order to develop a good semi-structured interview. First, design and revise your interview schedule. Discuss it with an expert, that may be your teacher, colleague, or a friend. Secondly, make sure that your interview questions are related to the research questions of your study, because the data collection is all about finding answers to your key research questions. If your interview questions are not up to the mark, you won't get answers to your research questions. So you should have some prompts ready, such as short questions related to the main questions of your interviews, in order to elicit rich responses from your respondents. You should also have follow-up questions, and the next slide has some examples of follow-up questions. Remember, it's not just a conversation, the semi-structured interview, and you should be focused on your topic and avoid digression. You should be steering the interview conversation to make sure that the participant is on track. It's a good idea to do a pilot interview before starting your data collection process. And piloting will help you see any potential problems with your interview questions that you can fix before starting collecting data. You should keep two things in mind while conducting an interview. First, establish rapport with your participant. Ensure that the person you are interviewing is at ease. Ask questions such as, how do you do that? Tell me what you are doing and why. Ask for permission to use a tape recorder or take notes. Ensure confidentiality. Be sensitive to body language and tone of your voice. Secondly, use a schedule which specifies the topics or themes to be covered. For structured interviews, this means a list of questions to be asked. For unstructured interviews, it reminds you which topics or issues to be covered. The order of your question is very important. So ask easy questions before hard ones, and positive questions before negative ones. Similarly, general questions should be followed by specific, and unstructured by structured questions. You should always have a transition between the topics or themes of your interview. For instance, start with your overall research questions. What are the students' study habits in the first year of the life sciences program? And then develop a number of topics or areas to be explored by asking questions as follows. Now you can pause the video here and see the examples of follow-up questions related to the overall research question. Another technique is that you have to listen to the participant actively. You have to focus on adding clarity and depth to the participants' responses. You should check apparent contradictions or inconsistencies in the participants' responses. You should search for opinions, ask for clarification, seek comparison, and pursue the logic of an argument by using these different types of prompts and questions. Pause the video and have a look. Similarly, you ask for further information as needed, as your aim is comprehensiveness of the participant's viewpoint. So you put things in a different way to check understanding. Sometimes you summarize the interview's main points or suggest alternatives to understand the point of discussion. Again, pause and have a look at the examples. So in summary, we can say that in relation to semi-structured interviews and in-depth research interviews, as a researcher, you need to develop competence in the following 5 areas. You need to know how to open the interview using appropriate formal language. You need to know how to put questions, how to use the questioning technique. You have to be an active listener, and you have to check and summarize understanding. And the most important thing is you have to record the data. Well, that's all for today. Thank you very much for watching. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.